ensure we retain competitiveness and indeed position ourselves to take advantage of the international commercial opportunities involved. And of course, it's always best to think these things through, not in isolation, but with our trading partners, especially with other members of the Asia Pacific Services Coalition, to which both TWCSI and ASR belong, and in which we work very closely together. Yesterday's session gave us a very clear update, I thought, on what is going on in the World Trade Organization and what other close trading partners, especially New Zealand, is doing, including as APEC chair for 2021, where APEC's own work program on environmental services has been under scrutiny by the business community as part of APEC's midterm review of the APEC Services Competitiveness Roadmap. Now, this is a process I've been personally quite closely involved with, and I'd like to share the business recommendations put forward in that context to which the Asia Pacific Services Coalition contributed. In a nutshell, what we recommended was that APEC shift beyond this endless and rather fruitful effort to agree on analytical definitions of environmental services and adopt a practical learning by doing approach. And in particular, APEC needs to start developing the basic policy tools required to facilitate regional trade in services, services which are incidental to, but frankly, they're indispensable to green growth outcomes. So the Business Advisory Council of APEC suggested that the basic policy tools would include some kind of tools for monitoring regional barriers to trade in services and assessing the trade costs associated with those barriers, because as businesses, we want to get those trade costs down, right? So ABAC has recommended that APEC collaborate with the OECD to develop a kind of green services trade index. And before I go on, I should just add here that yesterday, Professor Mike Young of the Institute for International Trade in Australia called for development also of another policy tool to specifically measure carbon subsidy equivalents, which sounds like a sensible idea to me, given that we also heard yesterday that developments in the WTO include a lot of thinking among some of the members about negotiating an agreement to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. But going back to the regional business suggestions to APEC, there is a big call for domestic reviews of environmental regulation to take place, including close consultation with the business community. It's been proposed that APEC might actually start some awareness raising activities in the region, reminding economies of the principles and processes for best regulatory practice. And one idea was to develop a pilot regulatory review framework specifically for environmental adaptation and mitigation services. And ABAC also has called for a specific APEC public-private dialogue on environment-related services. So our event today is a very good start in that direction, because today's session focuses on sharing business perspectives and business case studies. I want to just say that from my personal perspective, I think the key issue for environmental services is to free up international trade. Openness to trade offers opportunities to access state-of-the-art technology and cost-effective environmental services. The barriers in this sector are largely found behind the border in the form of regulatory diversity and regulatory measures that frankly lag behind technological development. There has been some recent consultancy work done also for APEC by my colleague Hildegunn Nordas, written with Ron Steenblick, also for the midterm review, and they argue likewise that what APEC economies need to do is get on with liberalizing market access. And interestingly, they include a focus on cross-border data flows, on temporary movement of services providers, and on public procurement for environmental services. What they say on cross-border data flows is the importance of ensuring that data from sensors that are monitoring the performance of environmental goods and infrastructure in real time can flow freely across borders, subject, of course, to privacy and security protections. And what they say about cross-border movement of services personnel is that typically a contract for delivery of environmental goods will include installation and monitoring and maintenance. So a degree of movement of personnel will always be an essential part of any environmental management system. They argue that to avoid disruptions and downtime in environmental infrastructure, suppliers of environmental goods will always need to be able to deploy services providers across borders. They also argue, and I think this is important to emphasize, for strengthening regional regulatory cooperation, for more mutual recognition of standards, regulatory equivalence, and where possible, regulatory harmonization. And in amongst the reform efforts they do call for efforts to reduce and eliminate fossil fuel subsidies because they artificially reduce the incentives to conserve energy and improve energy efficiency, and they undermine markets for non-fossil alternatives for providing heat or electricity. Finally, this report reminds us that public procurement accounts for a very large part of the market for environmental services. International tenders can be complex, administrative, requiring technical competence and administrative capacity, and they argue there is a lot of scope for improvement in openness, transparency, and non-discrimination in public procurement practices in several APEC economies, which would help cut compliance costs for services providers. So my conclusion is there is a very big trade policy agenda here. Trade policy needs to be modernized to support the integration of goods and services into systems and solutions using new technologies such as the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. This is what will help reduce waste, monitor air and water quality, support development of greener, smarter cities, and greener production of goods and services. The future international business opportunities in this sector are very real, as I'm sure our business speakers today will demonstrate. So our business advocacy back into the policy arena is going to matter a great deal as well. Now, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank Professor Jane Brockman give us very excellent open remark and talk about the cooperation and the potential cooperative mechanisms of the climate service and environmental service. So now today in this session we have the three distinguished speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Tomo Machiba, and the second speaker is Mr. Matt Hingerty, and the third speaker is Dr. Ximin Pen. Let me briefly introduce the third speaker. The first speaker, Mr. Machiba, is a partner of the ERM leading climate change and corporate sustainability advisory service in Yokohama, Japan. And Mr. Machiba has over 20 years of experience in sustainability. He is actually specialized in the governance and the policy coordination in climate change, energy transition, and the communication with the public. I think she will give us a very living and a very rigorous experience talk. And the second speaker is Matt Hingerty. And Mr. Hingerty is Deputy Chairman, Deputy CEO and the Chief of the Business Development Star Scientific Limited. He is one of the most senior communication and governmental relation professional. And Mr. Hingerty joined the Star Scientific teams in 2020. He has served as ministerial chief of the staff at both of the federal and state level of governments. So, and the third speaker is Dr. Qingmen Peng. Dr. Qingmen Peng is the founder and the CEO of the Weather Risk Export Incorporation and an adjunct professor in the Department of Atmospheric Science in the National Central University and the CTBC Business School in Taiwan. Dr. Peng Qingmen is very active in Taiwan's sustainability area, and currently he also chair the one TV program in Yahoo TV programs, which is very famous in Taiwan. So we invited the three speakers giving us their experience or their spatial environmental management schemas by their speciality. So everyone has 15 to 20 minutes. So because today we have very enough time, so after every everyone's talk, we are open to the floor, and we have the broad discussions for the climate service and the environmental service. So
I'm happy to start if you need me to.
Okay, so I think due to the internet instability, so let me jump to the second topic. So the second topic will present by Mr. Matt Hingerty. He will give us the title Service Policy Renewable Energy. You have 15 to 20 minutes, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Nadia. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the Taiwan Coalition of Service Industries. And thank you, Jane Drake-Brockman, for the invitation via the Australian Services Roundtable, of which I am a life member. It was Miss Pelham yesterday who said that the private sector is leading ahead of the public sector in the task of the transition of industries to cope with climate change. And she could not be more correct in saying what she said. Today, I'd like to give you an overview of us as a company, of Star Scientific as a company, but only as an example, as a case study of what is the incredible amount of innovation and entrepreneurship and investment that is happening across the globe that is not necessarily in the public eye. We've also seen the efforts of large companies like Total, Shell, BP, and others in this space. And I'm specifically talking about hydrogen, for we are a hydrogen company. But below the public gaze, the efforts are far broader and far deeper in the small, medium, and growing enterprise sector. And so I'd like to give an example of us on behalf of all those entrepreneurs that are working on climate change out there. So, Nadia, are we right to go with the slides? So let's move on to the first slide if we can, Nadia. Okay, so Star Scientific, about us. We are a research and development firm that is 25 years old. We're based on the Central Coast, just north of Sydney and south of the industrial port of Newcastle, in the traditional lands of the Darkinjung people, and I would like to acknowledge them. There's a photo of the Prime Minister of Australia during his visit to our facility earlier this year. We've spent most of our life researching muon catalyzed fusion. Move on to the next slide, please, Nadia. While based in Australia, we are global in outreach. We have an office in Zurich, where Star Scientific Europe is based. Also, our financial subsidiary, Planet Power Finance, that is raising our investment for our investments in the whole of the hydrogen supply chain, and Planet Power Systems, that will be our customer-facing organisation. We are opening offices in the US, in Singapore as well. And while we are definitely engaged in the developed world, as you have to be in the hydrogen space, we're engaged with Japan, South Korea, Germany in particular, and increasingly the US after the Biden election. We think the most exciting opportunities for hydrogen is in the developing world, specifically Southeast Asia, specifically India, and specifically on the African continent, where we are deeply engaged ourselves. And that is not just about climate change. That is about economic development. That is about reaching out to the 1 billion of people in the world who don't have access to electricity. And we think hydrogen, and when I say hydrogen, I mean green hydrogen, can play a role there. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Nadia. Thank you. So, as I said earlier, we were for 25 years researching muon catalyzed fusion, and over the course of one of our experiments, we encountered an anomaly or a problem, which we soon realized was a profound discovery. That profound discovery is what we call HERO, or the Hydrogen Energy Release Optimizer. What HERO is it is a true catalyst. When you introduce hydrogen and oxygen to it, it forms a bed that allows what hydrogen and oxygen do best, that is to form water, which we do, we form pure water. But in doing so, we release an enormous amount of heat rapidly. The important points being there is no other energy input into the system. It is a true catalyst. It does not get used up in the process. Therefore, there is no combustion. But I'd like to now demonstrate to you in the short film, Nadia, HERO in work.
The HERO technology utilises hydrogen and oxygen gas, combines them in the presence of our HERO catalyst, and produces vast amounts of usable heat, and water is the only other output. Okay, so we're going to give you a brief demonstration of the HERO technology. The pipe that you can see coming in from the top carries the hydrogen and oxygen fuel. It will react onto the HERO surface. You can see
Nadia, can you expand the slide
that will be
screen?
our temperature measurement for the demonstration. So we'll turn the hydrogen and oxygen fuel on and we'll get the demonstration underway. So you can see the temperature already starting to change. The HERO reaction is that fast. So you'll notice that the HERO material itself starts to change from a darker colour to a lighter colour. The temperature's already zooming. We're up through 35 degrees and zooming quite quickly. If you look on the right-hand side of the graph, you can see that taking away. The HERO material itself is obviously now gone from being dark to quite grey. Temperature's already up through 150 degrees. The reaction happens very fast. You can probably just start to see there'll be beads of water forming on the bottom of the apparatus. Again, reaction continues to zoom away with the fuel. Again, we've just crossed through 300 degrees already. You can just start to make out the suggestion of condensation on the bottom of the glass there. Again, it's the water vapour that comes from the reaction. A hint of an orange glow coming from the HERO material at the moment because we've just crossed through 570 degrees. The glow slowly starts to become stronger and stronger. The temperature that it's generating now actually starts to clear the condensation from the glass. temperatures are now crossing up through 660 degrees. That orange glow is now very pronounced. And temperature is rapidly approaching 700 degrees. So we've just crossed through 700 degrees. You can see the hero materials well and truly glowing a lovely orange now. And the temperature now is 715 degrees. So we'll shut the reaction down. All that means is we're going to take away the hydrogen and oxygen fuel, and you'll see the temperature starts to drop away, and the hero material has returned back to its original state. The combination of hydrogen and oxygen in the hero happens without the presence of a flame. It's not combustion in that sense, which makes it incredibly safe. It also opens itself to a wide range of potential applications.
So there's a demonstration of Hero in action. We have now established and built a pilot active side heat exchanger that is producing supersaturated steam without combustion, and we plan to expand our outreach in the very near future. The first uses for Hero that we envisaged were for retrofitting fossil fuel powered power stations. The theory being that there's nothing wrong with a coal-fired power station per se. It's simply a boiler and a turbine. It's the fuel that's the problem. Through our engineering consultants, Arup, we were able to map out a power station on, if you just move to the next screen, thanks Nadia. We were able to map out a power station on the eastern seaboard of Australia. It is theoretically very easy to do, to flip a coal-fired power station to hydrogen using a Hero system, and much savings can be made by that. The issue is that you are talking a lot of green hydrogen that is required to power that power station in amounts that don't exist as yet. Can we just move through the next couple of slides there, Nadia? And to the next one, thank you. Thank you. Over the last 12 months, we started winning some international awards. Late last year, we won the Emerging Technology Award at the S&P Global Platts annual awards, and we're a finalist again this year. Earlier this year, we won the inaugural Hydrogen Awards for the Sustainable Energy Council. And then a very interesting thing started happening. We started getting phone calls from around the world, from Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere, from companies that were searching for industrial heat. They were looking for better ways to provide heat for their industrial processes, and many of those were in the food and brewing areas. A good example I often use is the New Zealand dairy industry. One of New Zealand's largest exports is powdered milk. To dry that milk, they're using heat from coal-fired boilers, which they know that they need to change. And this is another point for the trade community that we need to take into account, and it goes back to Ms. Pelham's comments yesterday. Regardless of what governments do around carbon mechanisms and carbon pricing, carbon is already being priced into the global trading system on a customer to supplier base. What we are seeing is that customers are saying to companies in food, in paper, in brewing, you need to get carbon out of your system, out of your systems, or we are going to go to your customers. And that's why they're reaching out to us. When you require industrial heat, in some cases 24/7, renewable energy such as solar, wind, via batteries does not give you what you need. The other interesting sector that is coming to us, and Jane Drake-Brockman mentioned it, is the data sector, in particular builders, operators and customers of data centers who have very high requirements for energy now, but their energy requirements are increasing as the Internet of Things, as 5G comes in, data mining, Bitcoin mining. They need to get off unreliable grids that are becoming increasingly unreliable because of the influx of renewables and the downturn in fossil fuels. They're looking for off-the-grid systems of energy. They think that hydrogen might be the answer, but there is an issue with the burning of hydrogen. There are issues with fuel cells at large scale. They are coming to us to help them. So that's another area of prospectivity for us. If we can move through to the next slide. Thank you, Nadia. We're dealing with corporate customers. We're also dealing with countries. As I said earlier, we're very interested in the developing world. Earlier this year, we signed an MOU with the Department of Energy in the Philippines to help them map out their energy future based on hydrogen. Many of you will be aware that the Philippines is a net importer of energy and they want to change that. They have significant offshore wind resources, as does Japan. Therefore, the capacity to generate green electrons, to generate green hydrogen. The Philippines, like other countries in the region, also have the geographic issue of a population spread out over a lot of islands, 7,000 populated islands, with varying levels of supply of energy. They want to develop their economy, but they need energy sovereignty and a new energy supply, and hydrogen, and in particular hydrogen, gives them the capacity to do that. Same with African nations. The continent is not joined up in one big grid, and also India, where we're having a lot of interest as well. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Nadia. So importantly for the trade community listening in today, there are some issues we are going to face in the hydrogen sector. One of those is, and I should say, there are a range of services that have already been discussed earlier, associated with the hydrogen sector: consulting, engineering services, the movement of people across borders, data mapping, research and development. Also, the use and guarding of intellectual property is very important. One of the issues that we're facing in Australia and we're facing globally is regulatory gaps. There is the risk of unforeseen and unintended barriers to trade in the hydrogen sector, the green hydrogen sector, because there are large gaps in the regulation of hydrogen and in skilling up a workforce in hydrogen. For what we do in hydrogen, which is the non-combustive use of it, there are no rules, there are no regulations. And we are currently sitting on a number of panels with Australian governments, with our standards body here, which is linked into the international ISO framework. Our fear is that regulation in hydrogen grows differently in individual countries. So the more harmonisation of hydrogen regulation across borders, the better for our role in the decarbonisation of the world. So we need to fill those regulatory gaps. We need them to be harmonised globally. I'm not going to talk in detail about carbon mechanisms, carbon taxes, cross-border mechanisms here. It's a bit out of my area of competence. I am going to Glasgow, going to COP, so I will be there, and I intend to be far more learned when I return. But the same principle applies. The more harmonisation, the more transparency there is around the regulation of these mechanisms, the easier it will be for investment flows across border to assist in the hydrogen revolution, in particular the green hydrogen revolution. The last point I wanted to discuss is around assurance schemes. Now, if you can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Nadia. accreditation or assurance schemes around green hydrogen are very important, and they're in their infancy, and we need them globally. If you are buying green hydrogen in bulk, if you are making it a virtue that your business is using green hydrogen, you need to be assured that what you are buying is in fact green hydrogen, which is hydrogen made from renewable sources of hydro, solar, wind, and other areas. We have been a foundation partner in the Smart Energy Council's private accreditation scheme here in Australia. You'll see there that there are a number of Australian state governments that are involved in this, and also the Energy Department in Germany is involved, and we understand that other national governments are going to come on board. The Australian government is working on its own government-backed scheme, which we will also be involved in. That government-backed scheme is taking a little bit longer because it's trying to cover the whole of the hydrogen spectrum, but nevertheless, these assurance schemes are important globally because, as I said, the trade in hydrogen will be across borders, and buyers of green hydrogen in particular will want to be able to assure that what they are buying is what they are paid for, what they thought they were paying for. So look, it's very exciting, the role of hydrogen, green hydrogen in our company and others in the transition away from a carbon-based global economy. It is extremely exciting in what we can do in accelerating development in the developing world. A lot is happening in the private sector, in business-to-business negotiations, in business-to-business investment. The regulation world needs to catch up. That's a pretty blunt message, and in particular, the trade community needs to catch up to what is happening in the private sector. I might leave it there, Nadia, if you could just flick to the final screen that has my contact details, and I will be happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think green hydrogen is very important. Now in Taiwan, the government is just engaged in the assessment of the net zero, but due to the not enough renewable energy, I think Taiwan's government or Taiwan's enterprise just assessed how can we get green hydrogen from Australia, from your country. Or, yeah, I think it's a very important issue. Particularly, green hydrogen is play a very important role the transboundary risk governance of the green hydrogen can be cross-border transported to different countries, particularly in Asia. I think now we know your government has signed contract with Singapore that you might send green hydrogen to Singapore, and we just estimated that. So thank you very much. So our first speaker, Tomo Machiba, is come back. So please, continue your presentation. You might have 15 minutes. Okay.
Very sorry about this. And can you project my slides?
Okay.
From your side, can you show the slides where I disappeared?
Yes, I think Miss Lin is just do it. Okay.
Okay, so starting from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much, and really I apologize. The line was cut. And just go the next slide. I present about innovation in services towards a sustainable future. Already Professor introduced myself, and I have been out of Japan for last 25 years, mostly working for international organizations, including OECD and the International Renewable Energy Agency, and the recently United Nations Climate Technology Center Network based in Copenhagen. Next, please. Briefly introducing about ERM, that's where I am working right now. The ERM is the world's oldest and also biggest sustainability consulting firm. And we are headquartered in United Kingdom, operating in 43 countries, including Taiwan. And we have 160 offices and 5,500 staff members. we are providing a range of different environmental sustainability services. And the climate change services is one of them, and that service is really growing last few years. Next, please. We provide the range of climate advisory services, starting from baseline identification, which means measuring your carbon emissions. And we provide scenario analysis. And these days, it's like climate-related risk and opportunity being asked to disclose. And where we need the analysis by how your future going to be in 2030 and 2050, according to the different temperature rates. Then, based on those analysis, and we provide also how to improve your performance through energy efficiency, for instance, using renewable energy, but also how to change your own business in the future. Based on this, and we also setting targets, and also implementation plan. Even we have a technical services providing feasibility studies and piloting. So we have kind of the range of service from throughout the life cycle. Next, please. And I present based on my work in 10 years ago at OECD. And I look at different type of green business happening around the world. Then we titled eco-innovation. But I realized, like innovation traditionally we see only technological innovation and how to create kind of new services, new products. We have different level of the creating new values. So on the bottom, we say kind of the size of the change, starting from the small modification towards more radical, bigger changes. Then left axis, which means you focus on product and process change, but also combined with a marketing mechanism, organization, the institution. So could be, like a larger scale change is involved. Not only you can do your own company, but also you have to involve different parties. Next, please. So our understanding of innovation is not only technology focused, but also we need a change in infrastructure, for instance. And in case of you need electric vehicles, you need a battery charging system. We need good entrepreneurs. We need a partnership with other companies, but also partnership with other sectors, or even NGOs and the government. And also supporting regulations or marketing mechanism will be necessary. Most importantly, creating new business models. It's driving, changing consumer behavior. So all the combination is like a part of eco-innovation we defined. Next, please. So particularly, I focus on analyzing business model innovation. We collected like over 50 examples from the OECD countries. And then we kind of categorize into 4 areas. One is product service systems, which means you sell not only products, but combined with services. For example, these days we have like an Airbnb and the Uber service, which is sharing or renting and services. But other areas also, we have energy service company called the ESCOs. So instead of selling energy saving equipment, which is super expensive, then this ESCO company basically provide this initial investment. Then company wish to make energy efficiency, they basically paying monthly or yearly as a service, so that they don't need to invest themselves, but still they can get energy saving in long term. The second one is I'm going to explain, but it's called life cycle models, including circular economy and the cradle-to-cradle models. Thirdly, using mobile app and ICT is pretty important to reduce the resource consumption and creating new services. Then fourthly, it's systemic innovation, which is more bigger level of innovation, including like eco-cities or new type of mobility and the public transport services and such. Next, please. So I focus on circular economy here. The circular economy means the three principles. The first, designed to minimize waste and pollution. Second, keeping the product materials as long as possible. And thirdly, regenerating natural system through use of the product and services. Next, please. This is a little bit of complicated diagram, but basically, instead of going from the top to bottom, next, please. Yes. Instead of going to the top to bottom, which means you kind of extract resources, and produce, then use, then throw away. This, as much as we are creating the circles, instead of going to the straight line, which is kind of contributing the, making the economy circular. Next, please. So as an example of what's happening is, for instance, Apple already, next, please. This is an Apple example. They are kind of claiming the circular supply chain, which means kind of making the responsible sourcing from supply chain, but also minimizing material input in the production process. Then also designing the product which lasts longer. Then after using and making sure collecting, recovering the materials. Next, please. So even like a business platform is created by WCSD Business Association. It's Circular Electronics Partnership. So several electronics companies coming together with NGO, then discussing how they can make more circular products and services. Next, please. So I want to introduce briefly about Japanese example, how circular economy idea is applied. In Japan, it's also ministry is heavily promoting these ideas. Next, please. The first example about kind of circular bottling, which means this is a 7-Eleven and the Coca-Cola example. And normally, you throw away PET bottles, then PET bottles becoming the pellet becoming like the clothing from the PET, basically. But instead of doing this, it's making from the PET bottle to the PET bottles, and collaborating between this 7-Eleven and the shops and the Coca-Cola. The second example is Loop, Japan. The Loop is an initiative started in the United States in a company called TerraCycle. Basically, kind of TerraCycle is coordinating and several companies asking them to use common bottles. Then they provide a collection system. In Japan, it's like a famous company like Ajinomoto and the Kikkoman is participating in this initiative using the common bottles and educating consumers. Next, please. Next example is creating from product to the service. Panasonic, they have kind of LED lights, but they start providing this lighting services to the offices. Basically, they provide LED lights, but also repair maintenance service, and together with the insurance, so that offices company don't need to worry about when they have to change the lights. And basically, they buy the lighting and per month or per year, so that they don't need to worry about this, and they always make sure they have a light. Next example is Komatsu. It's making like a bulldozer, the heavy equipment for the construction. So they put different sensors in this machine, always communicating with the central center and for the data from the machine, so that in case of they need a repair, then immediately the part is arriving. And also like how actually the consumers and the construction people using the machine, so that data can be utilized, so that they can provide better services with lesser cost. And then construction company just can buy the services from Komatsu instead of renting or buying the heavy equipment. Next, please. Then third example is, like we talk about food loss. And normally like 1/3 of food is going to be dumped around the world. So how to save on those food? So NTT, it's a telecom company, came up idea of kind of monthly renting digesting machine to the food company. The food company using this and to make a compost going to the local farmers making the vegetable coming back to the food company. So that this is a telecom company, but telecom company can manage to facilitate the local and food chain creation. Then second example is insurance company Sompo Japan making partnership with a food bank NGO. And then Sompo is providing insurance to the food producing companies. The food producing company might be making an accidental loss of food because of a road accident, for instance. Then those foods can be going to the food bank, still can be edible and usable. But it costs. So insurance providing the cost of sending those accidental loss of food going to the food bank, so that food loss is minimized. That's a new service. Next, please. So concluding this presentation, and I kind of proposing how you can also participating in the circular economy and the new business ideas. Next, please. So you can kind of sharing your idea about circular economy among colleagues. Actually helping the design circular product and services, then rethinking about the business model itself, how to take a look on your product instead of going to the dump field. Next, please. Then final thought is where the services going to the net zero future. And I'm thinking about for instance, biomaterial is getting popular instead of using petrochemical materials. And instead, these days, it's many companies asking how we can make sustainable materials. Also, under COVID-19, we all talk about really we need offices, or your home is becoming offices, or do you need to kind of stay in the same place all the time? So, we can think about more innovative way of, creating the new spaces. And before was always we want to travel, we can make a kind of conference without traveling like this. So that's where we are creating the new services. So in that way, it's we can create new business opportunities by thinking about, how not to move, how not to eat, how not to live the same place. Then, you might end up making a kind of new business ventures. And lastly, it's zero net future. It's not necessarily uncomfortable future. And I would say because making the new kind of services, we can certainly make the comfortable but net zero future together. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank Tomo give us the case shows of the circular economy. I think circular economy is actually very important and related to the legal or regulatory schema and the business model in different countries. Taiwan's government actually defined circular economy is one of the 6 strategic key industry in the decades. So we just also engage in these areas very much. So then we had the third speaker, Dr. Pen Qi-min will give us the topic transformation of service in response to climate change. Qi-min, please, you have 15 to 20 minutes, okay?
Okay, thank you, Professor Zhou and everyone. And I would like to, it's my honor to join such this kind of service industry. But everything is a service industry. And however, today I will talk about what I did recently about the climate ambition into industry action. And why I say it is because recently 8 major Taiwan ICT company especially one is from the global company we call Microsoft. And Microsoft Taiwan joined our TCP, we call Taiwan Climate Partnership. And it includes TSMC. I think all of you can know this company, very important semiconductor company in the world. And also two computer company, Acer and Asus. And also Delta. Delta is something like a motor. Also is they pay a lot of attention about climate change issues. And AUO is the LCD or LCD company, and a lot of the monitor is from the AUO. And Pegatron is just like the make the notebook or just for lots of the company. The 8 major ICT company and also semiconductor company work together. We call a Taiwan Climate Partnership. What I want to do, because the global regulation, especially after the Paris Agreement, the EU, they have the C-band and also the following guidelines. So everybody take care about the regulation in the future. And also the leading company in the world, for example, Apple, their iPhone will be net zero before 2030. So even some company like TSMC, their chip is from the iPhone, the chip is from the TSMC. They also be pushed by the Apple. You should be net zero. And so such is this leading company in Taiwan. They are also a part of a supply chain in the world. They got a pressure. So they organize to work together, and we should do something to meet the net zero impact. So they work in Taiwan, and we estimate the supply chain will be more than 4,000 companies. So especially 80% of the 4,000 companies are a small enterprise company. And what we want to do is a regulation, carbon zero, efficiency, and adaptation about climate change. So in less 1 year, we work together. So you can see this picture. It's before in the Earth Day in this April, and the newspaper announced this because they mentioned the government is very slow, and because the enterprise they got a pressure from the global, especially from Apple, Amazon, and the other company. So we should want to do that and lead the supply chain to work together to do that. And you can see the major 8 boards was there. And I remember Mr. Professor Zhou was also there, and Professor joined our meeting. And such is kind of the meeting. The concept is from the UK, because the UK, they have also some leading company. They work together and work with the government. And also from Japan, they have the JCLP, Japan Climate Leader Partnership. And the enterprise leader work together to dialogue with the government. And so such is kind of event is very successful. Initiate. Also, we got the support from our Vice President, Qingde Lai, and we work together. And what we did recently, and because the 8 major company, they have their sustainable group. For example, Asus, they have 40 people, more than 40 people to do the climate change issues. And also even the other company. So I calculate the number even in all of our meeting, about more than 200 people doing the climate change issues. So one company, maybe just 10,000 big company, and their climate change group, maybe probably 5 to 10 people. But right now we have 200 people to join this group together. And what we did recently, because the ICT industry is the first wave of industries that Taiwan face most directly and profoundly in the face of the climate change. Because the ICT, especially semiconductor, also computer, LCD, they are very important to Taiwan. We export our product to the international, about more than 50%. So everybody care about this. They are the first way from the climate change. What we want to do, the first things we want to do is the enterprise themselves and also the supply chain. And we want to carbon zero in the beginning. So the 8 company promise we shall be net zero. But in the beginning, just one company, in the local company we call TSMC, they promise RE100, just one company. But until today, 6 companies joined the RE100. And so it's very successful because all of the big boss, the big boss got the pressure from the others. So such is kind of the pressure, especially peer pressure during the partnership is very important to our success. And also we will have a climate training courses with the university working together. And we also, when we want to know that some of the company, they claim, Dr. Pong, we should have a white paper to the government because the government sometimes is very slow, and we should write down some suggestion from the enterprise to government. And however, what I know, because such is kind of enterprise, they're very focused on their enterprise. They did not understand the government what they did. So we have some dialogue with the government, especially each by each. For example, the power energy department, and also some water department, also some climate change department. So we have some dialogue with the government and also connecting global. For example, in this COP26, we will join the COP26 to have some webinar there. And probably next year, all of our A member will have one pavilion around this COP27, probably, because we apply the UNFCCC as an NGO. And the last thing is a public awareness, because sometimes the people, the end user, they think the climate change is not their business. But for the enterprise, if they can raise the public awareness, it's good for us to do something like that. So we have two topics. One is in Taiwan, sometimes during the summertime it's very hot. We want to have some activity we call cool down the heat island, and also disaster prevention. For example, this year, Taiwan meet the very severe drought situations. So how to strengthen the resilience is very important. Not only donate the money to the people, we can do something to help the people about that. So we call public awareness. However, what we focus now is enterprise and supply chain. It's not easy. For example, ASUS and Acer, they are competitors. It's not easy to change to swap or also to share the supply chain. And also, we can the TSMC. They are very, very big semiconductor company. Their supply chain is totally different with ASUS. So it's very difficult job to how to work together, how to organize the supply chain together. So recently we are trying to do that. And what we did recently, for example, this week we have a dialogue with the local energy bureau, and we talk to their policymaker. For example, we argue about the renewable energy, how their market will be made, and how can we buy the renewable energy, the green energy about that. So we have some dialogue. You know, every 2 weeks we have one dialogue. The enterprise work together, dialogue with the government directly. So it's very solid suggestion and also guideline for us, because we know the government policy in the future, and the government can hear the enterprise voice directly. So it's very successful. We had already 6 webinar about that. For example, our industry bureau also have dialogue with us about the C-band, the European C-band, the C-band, and the carbon tax. And we have some suggestion about the government. You should not only the carbon pricing, just carbon tax about that. Probably you should move forward to the carbon trading. The carbon trading to the free market. You can fascinate the real reduction about the climate change. So I think it's very important to have some dialogue about that. And however, what I think the gap between the government and also the enterprise is still big enough. And so we still have lots of the dialogue about that. And for example, this case is I'm sorry, it's in Chinese, because the AUO is a very, very big LCD company in Taiwan. They talk to our government, what's your energy efficiency about the carbon, and it's too high, how to reduce, and what's in the future, because it can link to the enterprise, their plan. How can they claim the RE100? It's very close related to government policy. So how to have a very good dialogue platform is very important. And so I think this is a statement. the TSMC is the first one. They claim they are also the first one semiconductor company claim the RE100, and the second is the Delta. I remember last November, only TSMC claimed RE100, and however later on Delta company claimed, and also ASUS this October they claimed RE100, and several months ago Acer also claimed RE100, and recently AUO also claimed they will be 100. So in the beginning, not just one company, and later on lots of company, because they got the pressure from the other company, although they are good friends and also are the competitor about the climate change issues. And what we did recently, because this company, they did not join the climate change issues for several years ago. They just write down in their CSR or ESG report before that. But recently, they mention they notice about the climate change issue is the public good. So we organized together. They in the Computex. Computex is very big ICT industry. Every year they will meet several maybe more than 50,000 people will join the Computex online or offline. And such is kind of the event. We have a pavilion about the 8 company. They claim we want to achieve net zero goal by 2050. And this is what they did, and we report it to public. So if you want to know that, you can search the Computex Cyber World 2021, and you can see what the enterprise they did, and they will have some announcement about that. So such is kind of each company what they did, and they open all of the information to public, can encourage the SME company, they can do that. Recently what we know, and such is kind of ICT company, they are very active about that because they got a pressure. But the other service company, it's not easy to push them because lots of people will claim the EPS, the earning money sometimes is more important than ESG. So that's the pressure after the pandemic, because the company, the survival sometimes is more important than the climate change. And however, such is of climate change, we change the atmosphere. So such kind of the change can weather all of the people to notice the climate change is very important. So such is kind of ICT company, what they did is very active in Taiwan, and very good for Taiwan. And however, recently we found, because such is kind of a big company, they have some funding to the people and to do some investment. Especially they can hire a big company to write down their CSR or carbon policy for that. But small company, they do not have any kind of resources about that. And also, such is kind of a company, their carbon, how to carbon measurement the carbon, how to do the most biggest carbon consumption or carbon reduction, what they can do is very important. But recently, I found most of the company, they do not have any good platform, just like a carbon dashboard about that. And some company are trying to do that. And however, some company is still very, very traditional, just like use the Excel file, just calculate every year and copy, and also the share, and they have several people, they should do that. So recently, such is kind of company, they work with the Microsoft, and the Microsoft, because they have the cloud system, we claim all of the data of the enterprise, can put it into the cloud, especially the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. So such is kind of system can help the enterprise. They can, the big boss and also the climate change department, they can know the carbon, the greenhouse directly, and this year, this month, they can know this directly. And so recently, we use such kind of platform, and they can also produce the ESG document to public. So recently, we want to, from this big company, they can use the system. Later on, because when they use this, and they can cost down of the platform fee. And recently we think, and we can open the source code and open such this kind of platform to small enterprise. And if the small enterprise or middle-sized enterprise, they can use such this kind of platform. They can easily understand their carbon emissions and also to achieve the goal of the carbon zero before 2050. So such is kind of ideal. The big company, they can work together and to change the atmosphere of the small enterprise and also our social society, and also provide such is kind of platform to SME. And such is kind of change can make the Taiwan society much better to switch to a net zero mechanism. So that's why I want to share with you. But however, it's going now. It's going, still ongoing, and we are trying to do that. It's not an easy job, but we will try and to share with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Chi-Ming, for detailed introducing the engagement of the net zeros by private sector in Taiwan. Actually, the Taiwan Climate Partnership, is just doing the different way for actually catching the goal and have a dialogue with the government. And now I think because in Taiwan, we see that the energy transition of climate transitions is actually leg up behind other countries. So now we try to actually catch up, our progress and keep pace with the world trend. So we have still about 15 minutes. So we will now open to the floor. Maybe we can exchange our opinion and have more discussion.
I think this COP26 in Glasgow is going to be very important for not necessarily for the decisions that governments make, but for the meetings that will occur on the sideline between industry sectors who are involved in the front line of climate change. As I was saying earlier, and we've just had an excellent presentation on companies involved in data and in technology. I think they are going to play a far more significant role by their purchasing in the transition than is understood. We had one data center producer in the United States say to us, people don't understand, we are the new steel. In terms of our energy usage, we are the new steel. The Internet of Things, 5G, Bitcoin mining, data mining uses such an incredible amount of energy. It's good hearing that last presentation that a number of the companies in the technology space are understanding that. And in Australia, it's a lot of the technology companies who are driving politically the agenda around climate change. So I think it's all going to come together in a couple of weeks in Glasgow.
Yeah. Is any response?
Yeah, thank you. Your idea about that. But what I notice about the big company, they have the resources to do that. But for the SME, because the cost of the climate change is still too high. But I don't think it's too high. It's very high. And however, the key issue is the market is not so transparent about that. So small company, even if they are big boss, they are boss, they want to do that. However, they do not know how to spend the money correctly about that. So how to make the market? I mean, the market not means the carbon market. I mean how to serve such as kind of company. I think we should have lots of the ecosystem about the carbon reduction. Some carbon reduction company can help the enterprise how they can do that. And however, in our local area, it still have a big gap about that. Just not clear. And some people say, oh, we can do that. And however, they can, sometimes the EPS, the earning money is still more important than EPS. So EPS, so sometimes the ESG, the climate change things, just like ethical issues, not real things. However, the 8 major companies, because they can get some benefit from the climate change, because they earn some reputation from that. However, the other company, they can not see the interest about that. So I think how can we reduce the gap about the big company and small company is very important. And so I hope that in the COP26, because this year we'll focus on the climate finance, I think that only the finance can reduce the gap about that.
Might I say, Professor Cho, that is an excellent point about the disparity between large companies and smaller companies. We see this in Australia and we are seeing it elsewhere. There is no shortage of intention from a lot of governments to spend money on climate change. In hydrogen, we see a lot of it being spent on the supply side, but the difficulty is for a small to medium enterprise, the rules, the application forms, the process of applying for these taxpayer dollars is very, very complex and very, very difficult. Even for a medium-sized company such as ours, and I've been around in governments for 30 years, I find it complex. So what you're finding is that large publicly listed global companies are sucking up a lot of the taxpayer dollars that are being invested in this space because they have the teams and the expertise or can engage the consultants to help them to do that. Whereas, as I hope I pointed out in my speech, there is a lot of this effort is happening at the small to medium enterprise level, and those companies just do not have the time or the expertise to engage. So I'm concerned that there are imbalances, and this is particularly important for the developing world relative to the developed world, where there are wonderful entrepreneurs working in this space, not just hydrogen, but in the whole renewable energy space. And I'm worried that there is a distortion where those that do have the expertise to engage with governments, those who can afford to engage the legal experts and the consultants to do it, are getting the taxpayer funding, whereas medium to small enterprises are missing out. It's a very, very important hidden barrier to growth and to trade, in my view.
Yeah, I think the engagement of the SME toward the carbon reducing is very important. And actually, in the global trend, particularly in the CSR report or the TCFD, or actually the ESG for the big enterprise. And now, I think in over the world, also in Japan, in Australia, in Taiwan, that are very important. Every big enterprise actually pay a lot of attention for doing that. But I think that we should have the different strategy or the stage of the catching the carbon neutral or the net zero way. Because, for example, in Taiwan or in Japan, the big enterprise industry actually contributes a lot of the GHG or CO2. If we actually can make the demonstration by the big enterprise, I think the carbon reducing way is becoming more easier. For example, in Taiwan, the industry actually occupied or the contributor the national GHG for over 52%, and the 30 big one contribute 86% in the 52%, and the 10 big one contribute 40% 40% of the national total GHG. So yeah, I mean that if the big company actually can take some demonstration and a very good cooperation with the local government, actually the way of the expanding the carbon net zero way is actually produced. And then I think about the SME is another strategy. They don't have enough capacity, financial support, or other technical support from government or from different way. So maybe by using the EU Green New Deals, they actually stress about the just transition. In the just transition, they actually want to invest a lot of the budget for help the SME towards their carbon neutrality. I think this is a different way. And that would also very challengeable in different countries. Okay.
Absolutely. A just transition is very, very important, which is why I keep coming back to the developing world. Interestingly, the surveys that we have seen would lead you to believe that we need to have youth very much involved. You look at a country like the Philippines, where I think I'm right in saying this, 50% of the population is under 25. And it is those young consumers that will be driving the transition. We saw an excellent presentation earlier. We saw it twice on the circular economy. That they are saying to us, and they're saying in the surveys, they want economic growth. They want to grow. They want economic growth. They want wealth, but it has to be on the basis of carbon neutrality, slavery-free, and recyclable, or the circular economy. And they're three. And it's interesting, the research globally amongst young people, it's the same, those three elements: carbon-free, slavery-free, and recyclable, or the circular economy. Very interesting.
Yeah, right. So
yeah, I have a question to Matt
Yes.
about hydrogen power, because I know that Japan also have the very clear hydrogen policy about that. However, what I see the roadmap probably is about 2030 have a real hydrogen energy they can produce in commercial. And I'm wondering when, because some people say, oh, we should do it right now. And however, some people say we can wait to see the Japan, their trend, because I know Japan and Australia, and also Korea and Australia, you have a very close policy for that. Should Taiwan join such a kind of a connection or collaboration in the future as soon as possible?
I think you should, and I think you should do it quickly. Look, 2030 is a realistic target. Some in the gas industry and the fossil fuel industry will say, no, not till 2040 or 2050, but they are wrong. We had a presentation from Mike Young yesterday, an excellent presentation. People often say that the issue with hydrogen, and particularly green hydrogen, is that it is not cost competitive to fossil fuels, but it's not a level playing field. There are so many externalities involved in a unit of energy derived from a unit of fossil fuel, taxpayer subsidies, a range of other externalities that are not costed into that unit of energy relative to what is being measured for hydrogen. So he was very, very correct in saying we need to know what the true cost of a unit of fossil fuel relative to hydrogen is. And yes, my strong advice to Taiwan would be to be an early adopter. It will take a little bit of time, but the volumes of green hydrogen in particular will be a trickle, and then it will be a flood. It will be an absolute flood once the technology is applied. And not just from Australia. Yes, Australia wants to be a major exporter of green hydrogen, but the Southeast Asian region, India, Africa, there is the capacity there to be producing your own green hydrogen, the wind resources that you have in your part of the world. So please, strong advice, don't wait, get in now. And you have the technology as well. You're one of the leading technological countries in the world. Don't worry, we need your smarts to be involved in this, and we need to all the trade bureaucrats out there. We need a level playing field amongst the global trading systems to allow these great collaborations to occur.
Okay, any final response?
It's been wonderful meeting you all and listening to you from our perspective. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay. So the time is approaching.
Yes.
We will actually close our session. Now we will invite Ms. Louisa Su, Secretary General Taiwan Coalition of Service Industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cho. Thank you very much for all the speakers and participants to join us today for service and climate change. Its role and the opportunity section 2. First, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Bureau of Foreign Trade and the Minister of Economic Affairs support these events. And we really appreciate the moderator, Dr. Cho, and the speakers, Mr. Tomo, Matt, and Dr. Pen to share their experience and how they help with the climate change and identify the possibility opportunity for the Taiwan's there to make these events very successful and fruitful. Herein, I would also want to thank the Australia Service Roundtable and Professor Jane Dr. Brockman's support. Both Australia Service Roundtable and Taiwan Coalition of Service Industry are members of the Global Service Coalition and the Asia Pacific Service Coalition. We work very closely and care about any important issues of service industry. We certainly have a lot of things to process and consider with since this is the first step for Taiwan Coalition of Service Industry. And what better way to cap this then follow the Taiwan Coalition Service events in a different topic. Well, thank you again for all the speakers and audience. I think today's event is very successful and fruitful. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you very much. I think this section is closing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. We hope that we have close the cooperation in struggle with climate change, emergency. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very
much for audience and all the speakers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.